Thanks, Katie. So yeah, so this is the fifth part of the series. Today, I'd like to continue our discussion on contractor management. So last time we very much focused on bringing contractors into the organization and getting the right data for that, getting the right processes together for that. And today we're going to do the other two halves, 2/3 of the life cycle. So before we begin, as Katie said, we'll send you the recording afterwards. Please submit Q&A, as I said in the chat window, whether it's contractor management, employee management, identity governance, single sign-on, federation, directory, data problems. These sessions really are for you all. Any questions, any problems you may be running into, related or not, please feel free to throw them in the question and answer section. Just want to be here to help you all out. We have a ton of experience in our org and have seen quite a lot of issues. So today we will talk a little bit about, as I said, completing the life cycle, contractors who are added to multiple contracts, contractors who are moving between contracts, as we all like to see a lot of this time of year, right? Rollovers or waivers, extensions, new contracts, people from the old contracts moving to those new contracts, maybe the same company, maybe different companies, how we can delegate some of that access, and then also dealing with some of the messy data expiration or contract expiration issues. So as we've seen before in the last 4 sessions, I've been developing federal ICAM solutions for the last 20 years and over 100 implementations. So as I said, I've seen a lot of stuff. So last time I talked a little bit about the Target breach and how it was a HVAC contractor that was actually what was behind that big breach. They had firmware updates that they were putting on HVAC units on the roof of Target locations, and they had used the same password all the way across, so all of their techs could very easily do those updates from afar, and that's what got compromised and got them into the Target networks. But right, that's not the only headlines we've seen since 2013. A lot of other organizations, if you read into their breach documents, say the breaches were a result of temporary access. And in many cases, that's a code word for contractor-based access. So the government, large commercial organizations, everybody is trying to solve these issues right now. So the goal today is to really set you up for success managing the contractors. So one of the things that I'm going to try and do for the rest of the series is provide people some checklists. And I know checklists aren't always the most fun, but for me, these are really good things to think about as you're developing your identity governance solution. Right? As we bring contractors on, we have them take yearly information awareness training. If they're privileged users, you might have privileged user training that they have to go through. If they're on higher security networks, they have certain things they need to sign and be put in place before they get access to different assets. We have requirements for people that are touching systems to have CISSPs, which are renewed on a yearly basis. So are you tracking those year over year? Do you need to track those over year? Or something like a Security Plus where you get it once and it's good forever. Right? We have those IAT, IAM requirements across the government for those privileged accounts. Right? And all of those things translate into roles and security checks, entitlement checks, and policies across your organization. So think about designing those processes and procedures into your systems, right? If you don't want to have to upload that CISSP certificate every single time that person has to request privileged access, right? That's more data in the system, more things to review. Probably be better just to have a centralized training management system, either in the tool or outside of the tool, that just feeds that data into you. And then you just use that as a check to say, do they meet the minimum IAT requirement or not, right? And then if they don't, set a policy for a flag that says give them a grace period to get it fixed. And if they don't get it fixed, revoke their access. And then similarly on departure, right? A lot of times it's not just take their PIV or CAC card or MFA credentials away, right? It's also they have property that needs to be returned. You may have to do an exit interview. You may have to read them out. You may have to contact the PIV card system or the physical access control system to turn off their ability to get back into a building. There's all kinds of different things on a departure that aren't just system and information related. So just a quick checklist you can use. This came from the New Zealand government's protective security checklist. I have a link below here. They also have some good things for onboarding, and they also have some other checklists for managing employees that might come in helpful as well. So one of the things we like to do is implement a contractor certification. So as part of being a contracting officer core, you're required to maintain responsibility for the people that are on the contract. And we know that a lot of times people come on the contract, leave the contract, and not always is their access revoked right away, especially on large programs, especially on very dynamic programs where you might be running some agile programs where someone's coming in for a couple of weeks to do a very specific task and then they're going away, right? You need to be able to get that access to them quickly, but also revoke it quickly when their job is done. So we like to do at least quarterly contractor certification. So ideally here, every contracting officer representative will get a notice that they have a certification, and very quickly it's a list of contractors that are assigned to the contracts they own. A lot of times we allow this to be delegated out to the lead from the prime contractor, where they take their first pass through it, and then they send it back to the core for final approval, which meets all of those FAR requirements. Additionally, you may pull in data from like Active Directory, right? And make it easier on your cores that say, hey, here's all of the people on your contract, and all of these people have logged in within the last 30 days. So it looks like they're active. Here's the ones that are beyond that, right? And or here's people whose accounts have been disabled because they haven't logged in a while, right? And just make it expose that data and make it easier for them to make better decisions. At this point, you may want to add some additional things on risk-based certifications if people have privileged accounts or not. Just depends on how far you want to go. But if you do have a contractor that leaves, you click in SailPoint a thumbs down button to say they're no longer part of the program, and immediately trigger their deprovisioning, right? That cleans everything up very, very quickly. So think about contractor certifications, think about how that works in your organization. And we have found, as here it shows, 15% of contractors had active accounts, but they weren't registered as a part of any contract. So that's also a report you may want to look at developing. A lot of these things we do have in the Uber Ether package for contractor management, but look at running a daily report saying, hey, here's all the contractors that aren't on an active contract, and send that back to your contract shop to say, hey, it's up to you to figure out where their last contract, if they're here or not, or fix the data or get rid of them. So just some other things you might put in there. Some other things that we like to do on contractors is when a contractor changes their contract, right? A lot of times either a contractor is put on multiple contracts at the same time within an agency. Like I said, especially on the more agile projects we have today, coming in, going out, specialized capabilities, if they're DevOps developers, they're programmers on specific technologies, they might be added to a contract for a short period of time, or they might be leaving a contract and joining another, right? We've got a 20% turnover in contractors in the federal government space. So people are moving to new opportunities, new jobs to get new skills, and they may be staying within the agency but joining another program. And when that happens, right, their accounts might not be turned off because to the agency, they're the same person tied to the same social security number. But the access from their last contract shouldn't live with them, right? We do have contractors that have 20 plus years experience with an agency. Should they have 20 years of collected permissions? Probably not, right? Their jobs and roles have changed over that time. So when you do see a contract change come in, is it their last contract, right? If it is, that's a point that you might want to begin the deprovisioning process for them. When they're added to a new contract, you want to schedule a certification, right? So if they've been removed from a contract, there's a contract left, that becomes their new primary contract, right? So this is kind of that transition period. And then you want to say, let's reschedule or recertify their access. And what we've done in these cases a lot of times, because these people do tend to do both jobs for a little bit of time, is we schedule a certification that gets delegated off to that previous contracting officer and says, hey, this person is rolling on to a new contract. These are the things that were provisioned as part of your contract. These are the roles that are provisioned as being part of the agency, right? Email account access, Active Directory access. But here's the other things that you gave them as part of your contract. Do they need to retain any of these, right? And maybe they need to retain them, but only for a couple weeks. So give that manager ability to say, here's the roles and entitlements they've been given. I'm taking these away today because they don't need them, but for the next 2 weeks, I kind of need them to do some of the old job too. But right, that builds an implicit contract that then gets sent over to their new manager, where they can then say, well, I agree with that. That's fine. 2 weeks of transition is no big deal. Or, hey, I don't need all these permissions on the new contract for this person. Why didn't you put an end date here? Are you going to be pulling them back for a long time? And right, it kind of builds this implicit discussion that happens between the two. And then once you certify that, right, we immediately revoke those permissions, and the person ends up with only what they need and have at the end of the day, right? And that allows us to get rid of that entitlement scope and role creep that people tend to collect over time. So that is really some of the processes we go through as people change contracts within the organization, regular certifications of those people on the contracts for the contracting officers. So what about when people leave? And this is always a interesting topic to talk through. A lot of it is more around agency level processes and challenges around contract renewal times, right? This time of year, a lot of things go through contracts with the start of a new fiscal year, a lot of onboarding, offboarding, extension of contracts, 2-week extensions, 30-day extensions as people are turning over to new programs that get bid, right? That transition out period. So what we like to do is we just build in a simple reminder for the contracting officer that at 60, 30, 14, 7, 3, 1, whatever you feel is right for your organization, provide a reminder that says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Contracting Officer, here's a list of the people that are on one of your contracts that are expiring in 60 days, right? Just send it out. Don't make them acknowledge it. Don't do anything in there. But, right, just say, hey, if this is wrong, or you know that, hey, there's an extension coming here, right? It just pops it in their head to make a reminder, right? Because if we don't extend that, everyone's going to get offboarded on that last day. And if things are going through the system and they know an extension's coming, well, they need to do something about it, right? So if they're sitting there and an update comes in, right, then it just filters out and they stop getting the reminders, right? If they're going to extend for another year or whatever it is, right? But if not, they've been given the ability to act on that over time. So one of the other processes we've built in, because a lot of organizations we see, especially as I said this time of year, is a contractor waiver process. Sometimes those contract management systems might be a little bit behind, right? They might be pushed into a data warehouse that's only loaded once a week or once every 2 weeks. And right, if that date changes and the end date is within the next week, all those people are still going to get offboarded. So you might want to build in a contractor waiver process that allows the contracting officer or the contracting officer representative to say, hey, by the way, I know this extension is coming. It hasn't been updated in our identity governance system, but I don't want all these people to be offboarded because once they are, I'm going to have to turn them all back on 2 days later, and then they're going to spend 2 weeks getting that access back to be able to do that transition, and we're not actually going to have a good transition to the new organization. So this process allows the CO or the core to set a new end date, right? That gets sent over to a procurement work group team that has an ability to approve or reject that, right? And depending on your organization, you might have to notify additional organizations when that happens. You might have to have multiple levels of approvals that a line item contracting officer gets it, and then the contracting officer's manager has to do that approval, or a rejection along the way. But if they approve it, then that just gets set inside of the identity governance system, and that gets extended. And then whenever that data update comes in from the authoritative source, whether that's direct from the contract system or from the data warehouse that you're pulling from, right, it'll get overridden. And maybe it was moved to be not 30 days out, but only 14 days out. Well, we'll notice that there's a temporary date in there set through the contractor waiver process. And when that new date comes in for 2 weeks, we set it for that 2-week date because that's the authoritative data, right? So some other ideas there on how you might handle that at the end of the year, and get around some of the provide the processes to save time during that busy end of year time. So, and then at the end of the day, contracts do expire, and the people on those contracts should be removed when they do. So we implement a process that's a daily contract check, and normally at midnight at the end of the day, we run through, grab the new data, and say, hey, what contracts expired yesterday? And then at that point, if there's no waiver date set and the authoritative date said they expired, we go ahead and remove those contractors from those contracts. If it is their last contract, we go ahead and send off the deprovision, deactivate, and terminate their accounts process to then remove all access on the last day of their contract, as one would expect. If they have additional contract numbers remaining, right, we kick them off to figure out who that owns those remaining contracts, reassign their manager to be their new contracting officer representative, and then automatically kick that through a certification process that says, okay, well, they were on these 2 contracts, now they're down to 1. Let's make sure all of that access from the previous contract that they're now not a part of gets taken away. And then, right, this is the deprovision, deactivate, and terminate process that we've shown before, exactly the same in this case as the employee deprovisioning, but we disable their Active Directory account, we might disable their VPN accounts, we might disable, call the physical security system to turn off their badge access. If right now remote, it's very hard to collect people's badges and physical property on the last day. We might send a specific email to the manager or contracting officer that says, here's all the things you need to do to take people off of a contract. Here's how to send out the boxes to get the hardware back, all of that fun stuff that we all go through at the end of a contract. And then, right, what other applications within the organization do we need to disable? Contractors normally don't have a reassigned subordinates unless you're allowing the contractors to manage their own people, which some organizations do that are on the contract. But if they were a manager of personnel or a contracting officer, we would fire a reassign their subordinates process here that would then say, okay, they've left the agency. Who's in charge of these people now? So, and then with that, I will wrap up with just one more checklist for everybody. And this is something that we use internally as we're designing new systems. And I realize I probably should have shared this earlier in the series, but for every single application within those applications, entitlements, roles, when you're designing enterprise roles for people as they, right, what does everybody in the HR department get? What does everybody in the finance department? What does everybody in the IT department get? Every single one of those things, you want to figure out who's the business owner, right? So when there's questions, when there are changes, you need to have an owner of that application. And similarly, if a contracting officer leaves a program, when somebody owns an application and they leave the agency, you got to find the new owner, right? So you want to keep track of those things and build it into the system as well. You need to ask yourself, what is the risk of having this role, right? Is it giving someone this role access to financial information? Is this giving access to contracts information? Is this giving healthcare record information, PII data, right? So think about the data of the roles that you're going behind and ask, are there additional things we need to do, whether it's policy related, to approve people in here, to certify people in here? Is there specific training somebody needs to get that role, right? How do you build that in? Is there a minimum clearance or set of attributes to gain access to that, right? So what policies do you need to be able to be in that role and maintain it, right? If it's something like a security clearance, if you lose your secret clearance, if you lose a special compartment, right, do you automatically get pulled out of that if you no longer qualify for the policy, or does it kick out to a process to have a grace period? But right, those policy discussions need to be had at an application, entitlement, and role level. How often should membership of those roles be verified? Who should validate that membership, right? Is it something that's a peer in the group can approve? So, hey, I'm still here. Joe, go ahead and approve it, who sits next to me, and we've been working together for 10 years. Or does it need to be the application owner and the entitlement owner, the role owner? Additionally, think about also getting technical contacts for those things, because sometimes connections to databases and LDAP servers and web services go away. That might be something else to add. And then what are your approval paths? If you do have approval paths, what ability to overrule those are, right? If you have separation of duties things, right? Can I be the manager and the approver for this? If I'm the manager for that group, can I approve my own things, right? If not, how do those overrules or policies get overridden, and by whom? And if you do have those policies being overridden, how often should they be recertified to say, yeah, we know we still haven't hired anyone in that role. We know this is a risk, and we're doing external controls to mitigate that. Additionally, this was a feature of SailPoint 8.1 that we're really using effectively was, should you apply a classification? So now you have an ability to say, hey, I want to tag all of these roles across all of these applications as PII related, or healthcare related, or finance related. So then you can actually say, now run a certification that says, give me all of the people in any application, anywhere across the agency, that deal with PII data, and have that certified by the policy shop that's in charge of that, right? It opens up a lot of capabilities that previously we had to code into additional attributes that weren't natively built into the tools. So just really good new functionality that was just introduced in the latest release. So with that, we'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions. As I said, whether it's contractor management related or not, feel free to pop questions in. And then our next session will be in 3 weeks. Hard to believe we're almost at Thanksgiving this year, but we're going to talk about managing applications with DevOps. A lot of agencies have hundreds or thousands of applications that need to be onboarded in a very quick timeline. We're working with one customer that's got over 1,000 applications, another one that's got 400 plus. If you're doing all of these things manually and having to hire developers to configure them, it's going to be a long road. So we're going to talk about some strategies to build templates, build some different metadata that will allow you to more easily manage applications, and then also move them from development to test to production in a DevOps fashion so that they can be quickly promoted with zero downtime approaches. So I don't see any questions at this point. So I will say, I think this is the first one. We've come in under 30 minutes. So I'll throw it back to Catherine or Katie at this point.